So we've had a fantastic day, and I'm delighted to say that we are going to end on a high note with a keynote address and a Q&A with Utah's Governor Spencer Cox. But to introduce him and to moderate the Q&A, we have my colleague and friend, Ramin Toloui. Ramin was most recently an assistant secretary at the State Department. He is now a distinguished policy fellow at CEPR. He is an expert on many things, including geopolitics, economic security, and AI. So thank you for kicking off this keynote session.
Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Governor Spencer Cox, our keynote speaker and capstone to an excellent day of discussions here at our Abundance Agenda Policy Forum. Governor Cox is the 18th governor of the state of Utah, first elected to the governorship in 2020 and re-elected in 2024. Governor Cox has a long track record of public service, having previously served as Utah's lieutenant governor, a city council member, mayor, county commissioner, and state legislator. From 2023 to 2024, Governor Cox served as the chairman of the National Governors Association. At the NGA, he spearheaded an initiative to promote respect in politics, innovation in government, and working across party lines to find common ground. His initiative was titled, "Disagree Better, Healthy Conflict for Better Policy," which I don't think would be out of place for a conference or a panel session here at CEPR. Governor Cox is a perfect closing speaker for our day of discussions. The theme of his 2025 State of the State address, delivered in January, was "Built Here." In it, he outlines his vision for building more housing in Utah through an initiative called the Utah First Homes Program that aims to build 35,000 starter homes in 5 years, more energy in Utah through an initiative called Operation Gigawatt, and for reforming the process of permitting for infrastructure development. In short, Governor Cox brings the unique perspective of the chief executive and political leader of a state who is engaged in the practical business of building more. Now, I wanted to personalize and add some levity to my introduction by incorporating a lesser-known fact about the governor. And to help me do this, I did what any student of mine would do, which is I used ChatGPT. And I asked it to give me 6 fun facts about Governor Cox to choose from. There was one I especially liked and fit with the theme of the conference. But the problem was that no matter how much I Googled, I couldn't find any documentation of it. I even pressed ChatGPT for a source, and it dutifully provided me a source and a quote, but I, again, couldn't find those. So for those of you who are familiar with these Gen AI tools, you'll recognize this phenomenon of hallucination. That is, sometimes these chatbots will just make things up. So rather than continuing my forensics, I thought we could just ask the governor to help with the fact-checking. So here are 6 fun, possibly facts about Governor Spencer Cox according to ChatGPT. Number 1, he grew up in a 0-stoplight town. Number 2, he is the first governor in Utah to have interned at the state capitol. Number 3, he and his wife moved their family into his parents' basement during law school. Number 4, he plays bass guitar. Number 5, he's a dedicated Utah Jazz fan. And number 6, he once participated in a public COVID-19 public service announcement with his Democratic challenger. Now again, I don't know which of these are true. I don't know if any of them are true. But the one thing I do know is true is that I'm delighted to welcome him to the stage.
All right, it is on. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be with you. ChatGPT did make up some stuff in there, for sure. I did not intern at the state capitol, which so that one was not true. I did not move into my parents' basement during law school. I did go to law school in Virginia. I went to Washington and Lee, but I did live in my uncle's basement for 2 summers during law school while I was clerking at a law firm there. So it got close on a couple of those. Everything else is true. I am from a very small town in central Utah, a town of about 1,200 people, where I returned to raise my own family. And I'm excited. I'm excited to be here with my people. You're my people. I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're right or left. You're abundance people, and you're my people, and we desperately need more of you. And so I'm excited to be able to spend some time with you today. Every governor gets to brag about their state. It's kind of our thing. It's what we do. But I like it when other people brag about my state, and so I'm going to let them do the bragging. 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, U.S. News & World Report released their comprehensive ranking of the 50 states. They do this every year. They look at over 1,000 different data points, 70 different metrics. They look at everything. So it's education, public safety, the economy, healthcare, you name it, they measure it, and then they rank all 50 states. And we were a little nervous this year, but for the 3rd year in a row, Utah was named the best state in the nation overall. So I'm very proud about that, and I think any governor would be, but I often get the question, why is that? Why are you having so much success? And I want to back up a little bit, because Utah wasn't always a place where people wanted to be. In fact, virtually no one wanted to be there. There were some native tribes that were in some parts of the state, but when westward migration was happening, everybody kept going around Utah and coming to, well, here. And if you walk outside, you know why, right? It's beautiful out there, and stuff grows easily, and it turns out there's like gold just laying on the ground or something. I don't know. It's a great place to be. Utah was not that place. Oregon and Washington, much better places. No one wanted to come to Utah. In fact, there's this famous story of an explorer, a trapper who had gone through that area, who offered to pay $1,000 for the first bushel of corn that could be grown in Utah, because he did not believe it was possible. And then a spunky group of people, including all of my ancestors, kind of got kicked out of their home for practicing a religion that made other people really nervous, and they virtually left the United States at the time and went to what was then a territory of Mexico, and kind of the only place that no one else wanted to be. And they decided to live there. Now, what does that have to do with this #1 ranking and what we're talking about today? Other people have said that necessity is the mother of invention, and the necessity there was just the necessity of staying alive. There were very harsh winters. The descriptions of the Salt Lake Valley were not kind. It was inhospitable, cold winters, overly hot summers, not enough grass for livestock or forage, impossible conditions to grow wheat or corn, and not enough water to do so. And so they did it anyway. When Brigham Young was leading kind of this motley crew out there, he did something very different. He said, when we settle these places, we're not going to start your farm and live on your farm. We're going to start farming this, but everybody's going to live in a community. We need people close together so that we can survive, so that when somebody's crop fails, somebody else is there to help them out. He understood how important community was, and it started this mindset. So one, a very entrepreneurial mindset, because entrepreneurism wasn't about making money, it was about staying alive. You actually had to invent stuff to not die, and that's really important. So there was that, just kind of building community. But then there's this second piece, and that is that the community piece and the connection piece. When someone else does good, that's good for all of us. That mindset, that non-zero sum thinking, is really important, and it's something that's persevered for quite a while. Now, that leads us to abundance. a couple of years ago, when I became governor, I started looking at the landscape of what was happening in Utah. We were the fastest growing state in the nation in the last census. So in the 2020 census, Utah was growing faster for that decade than anywhere else in the country. More and more people were coming out there. That increased significantly during COVID. A lot of those people whose ancestors settled here decided during COVID that they would go back to Utah. And a whole bunch of people came back to Utah, and their second homes in Park City became first homes, and others were looking for a place to put their kids in school when schools were closed here, so they came out there, and we saw just a huge increase in people coming there. And suddenly the price of housing just started skyrocketing. Now, it's done that in most places in the country, but the Intermountain West saw it more than anywhere else. So Colorado, Utah, Idaho, a little bit in Arizona, we've kind of led the nation when it comes to the pricing of homes. That deeply concerned me. The second piece that concerned me was around energy, and I know we're going to talk about both of these things here in a minute during the Q&A. But I started looking around, and I had a group come to our utility, and they wanted to build a data center. So this was like a year and a half ago. And I said, that's great. We've built some data centers here. Data centers are fine. You know, they're not the best. They don't create a lot of jobs. They use a lot of resources, but they're good. They pay property taxes, and we think it's important. And I said, how much power do they need? And I need to back up a little bit and just tell you, for those of you that know anything about power, those of you that don't, the entire state of Utah runs on 4 gigawatts of power. So since 1847 to 2023, we had built about 4 gigawatts of power. The entire state of Wyoming runs on about 900 megawatts, so not even a gigawatt of power. This company, and it wasn't just a data center, but it was a campus of data centers. They were requesting 1.4 gigawatts of power, right? More than 25% of our entire state's capacity. Just an impossible number, by the way. There's no way on earth. I mean, at our very best, we may be able to free up 400 megawatts of power, and that's for everybody that's coming to Utah and growing, not just one company. And so I remember I went to a meeting a month later, and I was there with a bunch of other governors, but one in particular, Governor Burgum, who is now the Secretary of the Interior. I said, hey, who also is a technologist. He had a technology company that he sold to Microsoft back in the day. I said, are you getting some crazy requests for power production? And is something happening out there? And nobody was talking about this at the time. I hadn't heard this from any other governor, member of Congress. And this was really less than a year and a half ago that this is happening. And he said, yeah, and we really need to start figuring this out and getting a handle on it. Well, you've seen what's happened, the explosion that's happened. And so shortly thereafter, I launched what we called Operation Gigawatt, and our goal is to double the energy production in the state of Utah over the next 10 years. And it looks like we may need to triple it at the rate we're going right now. And so that's where this concept of abundance comes from. And I just felt like we were constantly being presented with false choices. You can either build houses, or you can have a high quality, high standard of living in the state of Utah. You have to choose. You can either build energy production, or you can have a clean environment, but you got to make that choice. I think that's a false choice, but these are the types of choices we continually see in the public policy space. And so we decided to push back on that. And I want to just touch on zero-sum thinking, and then I'll stop talking and we can get to the Q&A portion. One of the reasons I think Utah is doing so well in these areas is that we do reject those false choices. So there was a study done, I think it was Harvard that did it, it's now been maybe 2 years ago, where they surveyed people all across the United States, thousands of people. It was a big survey, and they asked a lot of different questions, but what they were trying to get at was this idea of zero-sum thinking. If somebody else wins, then I lose. It's a dog-eat-dog world. The economy is a winners and losers economy. And they came back and said, sadly, that most people in most states now have a zero-sum model of the world. And I think we see that in our politics today for sure. If somebody else is winning, then I'm losing. And they said there are still a few states where the majority has a non-zero sum view of the world, but then they said there's this weird state in this state of Utah that rejects zero sum thinking, that still views the world in a positive light. That if somebody else wins, that's good for all of us. And my hope is that through the abundance movement, and I'm really grateful that there's a new book out on this topic. Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, good people, a left-leaning book for sure that are awakening to this idea that we can reject these false choices. You know, we as a country used to build things, and this is where I'll end around built here. One of the reasons we adopted for my second term as governor the mantra of built here, and that it's a time to build again, is that we used to be able to do this stuff. In fact, we used to be the best at it. Now we're pretty good at building software and you know, so some technologies. We're really bad about building infrastructure. We're bad about building energy production. When I was born, by the way, and I turned 50 this year, we built nuclear plants in this country, over 100 nuclear facilities in about a 12-year span. Incredible what we were able to do as a country in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. Since I was born, we've approved and built 2 nuclear facilities in this country. That's this is how old it's been since we actually built stuff like that. And but those are choices that we've made, choices as a country, choices we've made to make it impossible to do the things that we need to get done, choices we've made to make it almost impossible to build new housing. We have a goal to build 35,000 new starter homes in the next 5 years. I know we need more than just starter homes, don't get me wrong, but I chose starter homes because there's a little less NIMBYism when it comes to starter homes. I love to ask people, how many of you grew up or raised your own family, started your own family in a home that you would consider a starter home, maybe 2,000 square feet or less? Anybody in this room in that? Yeah, I think we turned out okay. I think so, mostly, right? But we've stopped doing that. We stopped building starter homes in Utah. We build hardly anything that would be considered a starter home anymore. And so we've made bad choices, I think wrong choices. Some of them we've made for the right reasons. We passed the National Environmental Protection Act, which was really important, and we should have passed the National Environmental Protection Act. Really matters. And then we bastardized it in a way that it was never intended to be used to empower people to just stop anything from happening. And I just believe in us that as Americans, if we made good choices once before, we can start making good choices once again. But it's going to take a lot of us working together to make that happen. And so I'm so excited to see a room full of people who are willing to make those hard choices and start doing the right things again. So with that, I think we're going to have a Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thanks so much for these remarks and connecting what you're doing, your vision, to the history of your state. One thing that's so impressive about Utah is you're not just talking about the vision, you're also hitting the ground running. So you articulated the objective for Operation Gigawatt last year. And now already in this legislative term, there are several pieces of legislation that have been passed, establishing an energy council, establishing electrical energy development zones. So maybe talk a little bit about what are, in terms of the rubber meeting the road, what are the key constraints in the electricity area, in the energy area, to realizing this vision of doubling the state's capacity?
Yeah, so the way we've done energy development in the past, we have a utility, and you go and you make a request to that utility, and then they go through their process, and it can take months and months, sometimes years, to actually get that done. And right now, it just isn't possible for our utility to make those ends meet and meet those ends. And so what we decided to do was we drafted a bill. We worked on it. It was a little controversial, but we were able to get everybody around the table and get something passed. It's a large load user energy energy bill. And the idea is that we'll still work with the utility, but we will give these large load users an opportunity to build their own power, be off the grid or be behind the meter. And that's going to allow us to move things much more quickly. This opportunity is certainly unique, and again, something we haven't seen since the 70s. We have a huge demand for power, and the companies that are demanding power have more money than God. I mean, they have lots of money, and they're willing to spend it right now. And so you've got the capital on the one side. Now we just have to remove the constraints that are preventing that from happening. And most of those are at the state level, although there are some at the federal level, and that's where I think this matters. Utah is a public land state. About 70% of our state is public lands, which makes things very, very difficult. And I'll speak now to the transmission side of things. So we can build energy. We know how to do that. We have lots of natural gas, which we can build right away. We can build natural gas plants. We're building and permitting lots of solar, although, again, this is a crazy part. To me, from kind of the environmental movement, that the very things that are going to make our environment cleaner are impossible to build on public lands. So if you want to build solar on public lands, which are the perfect places to do it all over the West, and but it takes years to get approval, and then you have to go through litigation, and so the very things that would help the environment are being stopped by the National Environmental Protection Act, which don't make a lot of sense to me. But you also have transmission, which is a huge issue, and again, especially in the state of Utah, if you're going to build transmission, it's going to traverse public lands. This is one area where there is some alignment between red states and blue states. In the West, we have problems with public lands, but in the East, you're building through neighborhoods. And so the NIMBYism piece there is really difficult. And I will just tell you that we celebrated last year the final approval for a trans-state transmission line through Utah. And we were really excited about that. We got all the approvals. The sad part is I started working on that when I was a county commissioner in 2009. If you're taking 14 years or 15 years to just get approvals to build something, then we are broken. I will just state at the outset that I saw the original plans for this for this corridor. The final approvals, there was not one additional tree that was saved, not one additional animal that was saved. Nothing changed from the beginning to the end. Well, something changed. It costs 3 times more now than it would have cost if we had built it 15 years ago. And you think about the opportunity costs that were lost doing that. So when I say we become really stupid, this is what I'm talking about. That should never happen, but it is happening. So those are the constraints right now. We have the money. The state is willing. We've now taken out many of the roadblocks that were preventing that from happening with an antiquated system, and so now we can start building. And again, you don't need transmission if you're building your power plant right next to your data facility. But it's not just data centers that need this power. We need more power for everything that's happening: advanced manufacturing, electric vehicles, charging stations. All of these things are going to consume more energy, and we want to do that in a responsible way. The last piece I will just say is this: if you are serious about significantly increasing energy production, we have to be serious about nuclear. Sadly, that can't be done at the state level. That's going to take significant reform at the federal level. We're very fortunate to have an administration that believes in cutting that red tape and actually making it possible. But we have to start building SMRs, small modular reactors. The reason that matters and is so important is that once you build the first one and get it permitted, then everyone after that becomes exponentially cheaper, because you're just building a version of the same one. The problem is the way we've done nuclear before is every nuclear facility is a one of one. And so it takes forever to get it permitted and make sure it's safe. But if we can get through these next few years, we can start building these very quickly. And I think that's going to be critical to the future of our country.
Can you speak a little bit more to navigating those constraints that come from the federal level? I mean, obviously there's only a limited amount of direct authority you have, but we were talking before we came on about the cooperation you have with other regional governors in the West. Of course, you have lines of communication with the federal government. There are legislators representing Utah and Washington. What's that dynamic to trying to build coalitions or create the persuasive power to alleviate some of these constraints that you face from the federal government?
Yeah, I'm hopeful because we are seeing coalitions being built in a way that they haven't been built before. So when we get together as governors, there is shocking near unanimity when it comes to the things that I've just mentioned. Red states, blue states, everybody's on board. So I'm hopeful about that. Sadly, the real constraint is we have a dysfunctional Congress. And I just, if you look at the founders, if you look at James Madison and the things that he wrote, they never would have believed that we would have a body of government that wasn't interested in preserving their own power. And again, the Congress was always intended to be the most powerful branch of government, and sadly they've completely abdicated that responsibility now to the executive branch and the courts. Well, that could be okay. I mean, I don't think it's okay at all. Let me be clear. But what happens is then every executive order gets challenged. The courts ultimately end up deciding whether they can do it, whether the president can do it or not. And even if the president can do it, the next president may undo it. And so if you're going to invest, it's hard to do that, right? So that's where that uncertainty is killing the potential of investment in all of these areas. We are desperately hopeful that Congress, so permitting reform, for example, we got so close last year. I mean, up until Christmas, I thought there was a chance we would think it was dead, and then it was alive again. And some of you have worked in this space, I know, and then it didn't happen. But there does seem to be momentum around some permitting reform, some NEPA reform, and because we have so many blue states where this matters as well, everybody's feeling it right now. I think there's an opportunity for us to get some of that done with the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as well. Broad agreement that it's completely broken and we need to reform that. So that's the dynamic right now. I think one of the problems we're having, there's a will amongst the top levels. So the Trump administration was really good at getting their top people, their cabinet level people through the nomination process. It hasn't been as good with the next level where stuff actually happens. And so we have the Doug Burgums and the Chris Wrights of the world who get this and want to see it done. But we don't have a deputy secretary of the Interior yet. Hopefully in the next few days that will happen. And so everything's just kind of on hold right now. And we're anxious to see that move. But the members of Congress are reaching out. We're having these bipartisan conversations. And so if we can get that engine revved up, we'll actually see some movement.
It won't surprise you that housing has been a big focus today. We had a dedicated panel on it. It also was prominent in the other individual speakers. Please tell us a bit more about the Utah First Homes program. You talked about the motivations for it and the need for it. What are the key constraints that you're trying to address?
Well, this will be no secret, and I'm sure I feel bad I wasn't here for the previous panel, but we're facing the same thing in Utah that every state is facing, certainly here in California and others, and it's kind of local versus state for sure. Who makes the decision? How those decisions are made, what are the constraints that are the incentives, I guess, that are keeping people from making decisions that would allow for more housing. NIMBYism is alive and well in Utah as it is everywhere. What we hear is, yes, we believe we need more housing, we want more housing built, just don't build it where I can see it, and that becomes deeply problematic. The few mayors and city council members that are courageous enough to approve some big projects get voted out of office very quickly, so that there's certainly incentive against them. We've tried lots of different things, and this continues to evolve. I mean, we've passed probably in the last 2 years since I launched the Utah First Homes Project, we've passed at least 15 bills around housing, maybe 20, around housing attainability and building more housing. We've certainly tried to mostly do a carrot approach in trying to incentivize communities to do more of this. We get a lot of feedback that, you know, we have 200,000 lots on paper right now available in Utah, but what we hear from the cities is we don't have infrastructure, right? So we've passed a whole bunch of bills around infrastructure funding, that they can create infrastructure zones, they can use tax increment funding to build the infrastructure that needs to be done. So we're giving them all kinds of incentives that way. We have taken a little more active approach around where there is a state nexus. So where we've built transit hubs, if we're going to invest millions of dollars in your community for a transit hub, light rail, heavy rail, bus, then we're going to tell you that you have to have density around that, and we feel pretty good about that. As soon as those start to touch those density numbers anywhere else, try to preempt zoning anywhere else, there's tremendous pushback on all of us. We've required affordable housing plans from every city, and they weren't very good at getting us those. So we started to tie that to transportation funding, that you have to come up with some strategies, or we're going to pull your transportation funding. I've got a meeting coming up with 40 mayors and their housing development people in their offices. And it's going to be a really uncomfortable, hard conversation where I've said, you know, we try to do it the nice way, and if you want us to do it the heavy way, we'll do that too. And I'm okay being the bad guy on this one. I've said, if there has to be a bad guy, I don't want you to get voted out of office. Let me be the bad guy. Blame it on the governor. Tell him we have this terrible governor, and he's making us approve these projects that need to be done. And so we're willing to do that. But we are trying everything, even some public financing for developers. I was able to take, every state has a state savings account, a treasurer's account, which is where all the tax money goes until it gets spent. And it's billions of dollars in Utah. We have about $15 billion in that account at any one time. It ebbs and flows during the year, but freed up $300 million of that to loan directly, a matching loan with banks at a 3% interest for developers who are willing to build homes under $400,000 in our state, starter homes. We'll actually get you 3% loans to be able to do that. And we've had some developers that are starting to take advantage of that. So I'm at the stage where I'm just throwing everything against the wall and seeing if anything sticks and actually makes a difference.
Well, you have this, experience of having gone from local government, to the governor's mansion. And I'm wondering, maybe elaborate on what have you learned, from that transition, and also during the time you've been governor, about the contours of this problem. I think one lesson maybe is what you just mentioned about it's useful if the local government officials can say, oh, the governor is making us do it. So that might be one, but how has your perspective shifted on some of these issues that cut across both local governments and state government?
Well, so first of all, the ability of a very innovative community to not build housing is incredible. Their ability to slow the process down, to add expense to the process that doesn't make sense. There are just so many pressure points where that can be done. So we've implemented shot clocks to try to stop some of that. You have to have approvals within so much time, or there's an automatic approval, right? You can't add lots of bells and whistles to whatever it is that they're trying to build. So we've tried to do some of that. I've learned that we need to do better on the messaging side of this. Trying to get the public on our side, I think, is really important. And there are ways to do that, but our big focus has been on our kids and grandkids. It won't surprise you that people aren't real excited to build houses so that people from California can move to Utah. That's not really exciting for people to do. But we know that because we did some polling several years ago, not on this issue, but on other issues, some really deep polling, a huge poll, the first of its kind in the country. I think there were about 90,000 people in Utah that participated. And one of the things we found was that people's people's greatest fear when you drill down is that their kids and grandkids won't be able to live near them. People really want to grow old near their family members. Now, we're fortunate to live in a state with a very young population. We've historically led the nation in population growth. We're really good at having kids. It was kind of our thing. Not as much anymore now, by the way. We were 10th in this a couple months ago when the last survey came out. But I always so we've really we've gone all in on that, and to the point where the legislature gave us $1 million to run an ad campaign this year, and you can Google these ads in Utah where we have their kids in the ads, and it's showing that they don't have a place to live. There's kind of almost a ring around the rosies type thing, but it's a house, and one of them gets left without a house, and it's like, oh, I have to leave now, and they're like, no, we can build another house, and so these really cute kind of commercials to try to help people understand the real impacts of these decisions. And I always say that you want your kids, we want our kids and grandkids to live near us, but not with us, and that's a really helpful distinction. And as someone who just had 2 kids move back in with them this past week, I'm really feeling this. This is personal to me, and so we're trying to change that mindset that building is good. And I like to remind people that density and growth is neutral. It's not good or bad. What makes density bad is if there's a lack of infrastructure. And so when you do approve density in places where there is no infrastructure, the quality of life really does go down. And so this is the other thing I've learned, is that you have to be truly committed to investing in infrastructure. You have to invest in roads. You have to invest in power. You have to invest in sewer systems and playgrounds and all of these things that matter. And if we're willing to do that, as a community, as a mayor, as a city council member, as a governor, a legislature, then we can keep the quality of life high, and we can show people places where we've done this. For those of you that are interested in growth and growth the right way, there's a famous project in Utah. A lot of national people have written about this. It's called Daybreak. Love to host you. Come out and check out Daybreak sometime. Daybreak was actually built in an old reclaimed mining land. And it's a development where there's increased density, but there's a lot of green space, and the density is different. They're mixed-use neighborhoods, so you have apartments next to townhomes, next to starter homes, next to mansions. I mean, big homes, all in the same community, and it allows people to, as they move up, to move to these different communities, and so showing some real wins, some places where people love to live, where there's actual density, just helps change that narrative. And I think we just need to do better PR when it comes to building and growth.
A third element that you have in your State of the State address is permitting reform, which is another infrastructure and permitting reform, something that has come up multiple times today, whether across all the panels, whether it's housing, energy, or manufacturing capacity. Say a bit more about what you've done in this area, and then also what there is left to be done to actually get some traction on what seems to be an intractable problem that is frequently discussed but seems hard to address.
So again, I'm fortunate to live in a state. I was lieutenant governor for 8 years with another governor who believed in this work. And so we've been working on permitting reform for years. All the low-hanging fruit was done before I got into office, but we've been able to do more. So a couple areas. So on the environmental side, where the state does have some authority to regulate, we've been working hard to significantly decrease the permitting times. And there's a couple ways we can do that. Sometimes we just need more people to review the permits, so sometimes you actually have to add more people. Sometimes there are technology pieces you can use, and this is one area where I think AI has great potential to help us lower the permitting reform times, because AI can work 24/7 and can work very quickly, and so can process some of these things. We're starting to use AI, I think, in ways that are important, but also just the way we do permitting. Instead of permitting every piece of a project, you can permit permit the project as a whole. And so we're doing a lot more of that as well. Did some of this through an executive order, and some of it through, and then we passed through the legislature, we passed a bill, as the legislature should do, that embodied everything in the executive order. And so that's on the energy side and the clean air side, the permitting side. When it comes to housing, again, this is where it's, as I mentioned before, it's kind of the local versus the government. And I'm a big believer in local control. As somebody who was a mayor and a county commissioner and a city councilman, I believe that the government closest to the people is always better. But sometimes it's not. And where it's not is, some of you may be familiar with kind of a tragedy of the commons. And we hear that a lot in environmental. The tragedy of the commons is this idea that everybody gets the benefits, but the downsides, the problems are shared amongst everyone. And so nobody really takes care of the problems. A good tragedy of the commons is the microwave in your office, right? Everybody gets to use the microwave, which is awesome. But nobody's responsible for cleaning it, so it becomes a disaster over time, right? That's a tragedy of the commons. This is different than that in that everybody gets the benefit of having a place to live. The people who are paying the price for it are the people who don't live there yet, right? They're the ones who will live there are having all of the cost of not making these decisions or permitting reform. So we're this is where we're really trying to push the boundaries between state and local government. Can we put in shot clocks to make sure that they have to do things much quicker? Can we say that there are standardized road widths, that you can't require roads that are wider than that add expense? Because if you're a developer, time is money. Right? Uncertainty is incredibly costly. Any developer or business person will tell you that no is a better answer than maybe someday. You would rather say no so you can use your capital somewhere else or work around that. And so, and then just trying to get to a mindset of yes. We're doing this permitting reform, by the way, in everything. Your driver's license is a permit, right? So, by the way, if you go to get a driver's license in Utah, now the average time in the driver's license department is under 5 minutes. We're very proud of that. The DMV, we're now under 10 minutes. We're very proud of that. So everywhere across government, we're trying to create an entrepreneurial spirit down to the front line. So if you just got hired yesterday, we want you to be questioning everything. Why do we do it this way? If you have an idea to make it better, we want to hear from you. We're putting QR codes in every government interaction that we have. If you go to a bathroom in one of our state parks, there is a QR code there for you to tell us if something is terrible in there. We have this customer service initiative where we want to hear back from people, from businesses, yes, but from our citizens across the board, and we want to respond quickly to those. So it really is changing the government mindset to we are providing a service to you, and we are a monopoly. Right? And so there's monopolistic behavior. I don't have to listen to this person. There isn't some other shadow bureaucracy that's going to come in and take my job if we're bad at it. So you have to be relentless in trying to change that mindset and get everyone rowing in the same direction.
I'll ask one more question, and then I'll turn it over to the audience. So think about your questions for the governor. We talked about some areas where you're collaborating with other governors. I'm wondering your perspective on competing with other states, competing with other governors. One of the panels today was on developing manufacturing capacity, and this is an area where states are competing with one another to attract businesses, attract industry. What have you learned in the context of that competition, in talking with businesses about their decisions, talking with your fellow governors about what they're trying to do? What lessons does that have for us as a country seeking to increase our industrial base?
So the lesson is that wherever possible, we should be giving that authority to the states. That clearly, I believe the founders intended that. This federalist system that we started with, the idea in the Federalist Papers that the federal government's powers and duties would be very limited, and the states would be very expansive. This idea of every state being a laboratory of democracy really matters, and competition is a good thing. I just promise you, competition is a good thing. It makes us all better. When third grade readers in Mississippi suddenly go from 50th in the nation to 17th in the nation like that, all of us start asking the question, what did Mississippi do? Why are they getting better and we're not? And we steal ideas from each other. That matters, and you want that happening. You talk about manufacturing. Utah led manufacturing growth in the United States over the past 5 years. We're really proud of that. I mentioned the state rankings. We're really proud of that. And you know who else is really interested in that? 49 other governors who are wondering what's happening in Utah. I do this all the time with my fellow governors. When I see a ranking where we're not up there, we call them and we ask them, what are you doing? And that's the cool thing about governors. It's kind of the last bastion of bipartisanship in our country. We actually like each other. We work very closely together. We steal ideas from each other. We share ideas with each other. I want other states to succeed, and so that's the lesson. Now, I will say there is one downside to it. And the downside is kind of this race to the bottom when it comes to incentives. I don't love that because you get positioned against each other. You have to write a check to get a company to come to your state, but this state's going to write a bigger check, and so you have to give away more. And I don't think that's healthy. I wish we could if I could wave a magic wand, I would get rid of all incentives across the states and let us just compete in all the other areas where it's important. But look, that's just one part of it. Power rates. One of the reasons Utah has been so successful, I mentioned manufacturing growth in Utah. The number one reason that manufacturing has increased in Utah more than anywhere else is because over the past 5 years, we've had the lowest power rates in the country. So that matters. That's a type of incentive, right? If your power rates are low, you want to come there. Workforce development is another competitive edge where we're constantly trying. We want smart people. We want them to go to college. We want them to go to our trade and tech schools. That competition makes all of us better.
Thank you. Okay, let's open it up. Let's start right here. Wait for a microphone.
Hi, my name is Liv. I'm an undergrad here studying urban studies. My question is about multifamily housing in Utah. It's my understanding it's mainly single-family homes, and I'm curious to what extent you might be hoping to change that, and what part of that is zoning versus what part of that is political or cultural?
Yeah, thanks, Liv. So I will say that while historically that's been the case, and while you've heard me talk about building 35,000 starter homes, I was very intentional about choosing starter homes as the messaging, right? It's not that we don't care about all these other forms. We need all of them, and I'm all in on all of them. But from a messaging standpoint, we found it was easier. People get it, because again, most people grew up in a small home at one time or started raising their kids in a small home. It was one area where I could get everybody to agree that it's okay, that there's nothing wrong. It's not going to hurt you if somebody builds a 1,500 square foot home next to your 4,000 square foot home. That's good. You want people like that. We've been really invested in doing more of this. Now, I am really interested in ownership. Because I'm concerned about what happens in a country where we have an entire generation of people that never own real property. If you look at retirement, and I don't believe that Social Security is going to be around when I retire. Certainly don't believe it's going to be around when my kids retire. And so being able to invest your money in a way that gives you a return later in life really matters. So this is where townhomes and condos really come in. We're building a ton of apartments in Utah. Salt Lake City, huge apartment developments there. That stuff is going to happen naturally. We have a condominium problem in this country. People aren't building condos anymore in many parts of the country. It has to do with insurance and litigation. So we passed the first of its kind in Colorado just passed the second of its kind in our state that is changing the regulation and insurance around condominiums to incentivize and give some protections, some litigation protections against people who are building condos in our state. So we're hopeful that the condos for many people will become the new starter home. So for $200,000 you can buy a condo, then hopefully move into a townhome, then into a single family home at some point. And so that's where our real focus is right now. Thank you.
Let's go right here.
Thank you, Governor. I'm Rimbal Tadwanis here at Stanford University. A lot of what you're talking about, including data centers, requires not just energy, but also water. And as you mentioned yourself, water is not abundant, at least so far. Is this a constraint that you are working with, or you found an abundance perspective or approach to that as well?
Yeah, so we are in a state of water scarcity in Utah. We're the second driest state in the nation, so water is always an issue. You've probably seen or read some articles about the Great Salt Lake, and all of these inland salt lakes are drying up around the world. There's been one famously here in California, and so I'm always concerned about water. The good news is that there are newer versions of data center that take no water, or very little water. They, in fact, I just toured one of the most innovative data centers anywhere in the country, built in Utah very recently, and they have an entirely enclosed water system, which is fascinating. Now, the downside of not having any water is it takes more power to do that. So the cooling system, so even more than normal, there are some trade-offs there for sure. But they found some really incredible ways to use air cooling from ambient air. There are other systems that use cooling, are able to take water underground to cool it a little bit as well. And this one does not take any excess water. Once the pipes are sealed, there is no new water usage going into this facility. So I like to tell people, look, we're never going to regulate our way into the type of environment we want. It's always going to be innovation, and we're seeing that on the data center side now.
Hi, so I'm from Utah originally, and you're right, I think our ancestors did not necessarily want to be there in the 1840s, and I would also argue a lot of people didn't even want to be there in the 1980s, so credit to you and the rest of the state for the growth, but now a lot of people do want to be there. And where I notice it the most when I go back is with traffic and transit, so could you talk a little bit about that? Because now to get from Salt Lake to Lehigh, it's not like it used to be, and that's with FrontRunner and the other transit that you've built, let alone trying to get up to the ski resorts on Saturday morning, which I'm not going to put you on the spot about the gondola.
That's
one
okay.
way to start a fight is
very
talk about
controversial.
Congress.
But,
another way to start a fight in Utah is to talk about the gondola. But anyway. Curious about that.
No, thank you. Yes, that's a challenge. We see that here in California, in lots of states. With growth, there are growing pains, and that's where the infrastructure piece, I think, is so important. So, we don't have light rail into Lehigh yet. We should, and that's something that I'm really working on and pushing towards expanding our light rail. Bus rapid transit is really important. I didn't believe in it at first. I absolutely believe in it now, and we're setting up more of these BRTs throughout our state to help with some of that. We're never going to be able to expand the roadways enough to keep up with it. We have to invest more in mass transit, and we're doing that. I will tell you, though, that I'm very excited for the next frontier, which is going vertical, and that is going to happen in our lifetimes. I think it'll be here sooner than you think. I think we'll see some of it in LA 28, and you'll see it when the Olympics come back to Utah in 2034. You're going to see a lot more vertical transit. So these are aerial drones with people in them, drone taxis, unmanned taxi aircraft. And we've been laying the groundwork for that for some time. Our transportation department 6 years ago started investing in the type of LiDAR and equipment that will be used to direct this type of traffic. We're doing it now, as many states are. We've got pilot projects around package delivery that is happening vertically. vertically. I saw once, I don't even remember where it is, they just announced DoorDash is going to drop your food from a drone soon. So that's going to be really helpful in taking people off the road. And I'm just a huge believer that that's where we're going to go. It's going to be cheaper and it's going to be safe, and vertical's the way you're going to get off at the airport. You're going to in Salt Lake City, and you're going to be in Park City in 15 minutes going vertically. And we're really excited about that.
So you have any questions in the back? I'll go here and then here. So let's start right here.
I wanted to come to your point on nuclear. I happen to have a nuclear engineering degree. I do healthcare because for 40 years that hasn't been a good thing to do with that degree. So SMRs, will reduce the cost, at least in theory. The problem was that we were dealing long ago was Yucca Mountain was supposed to come online to put the nuclear waste out there sometime around 87 or something like that. It's never happened. And so how are you thinking about if we did that, how are you going to manage the SMR's waste?
Yeah, so this is an area where we still have to grapple with this as a country. Utah and Texas are the only two states that have some sort of nuclear storage right now. And we're not real excited to take everybody's nuclear waste and put it in Utah, obviously. So that's something we do need to grapple with. What I will say, and you probably know more about this than I do, but there are some incredibly innovative companies right now that the waste is going down drastically, and they can recycle and reuse what was traditionally thought of waste and completely extend the life cycle of this. At least this is what I'm being told by people who are starting to build these companies. But there will be waste, and we will have to grapple with that. We're willing to store Utah's waste in Utah, and it may end up just being that every state's going to have to figure out how to eventually store their own waste. I still like the Yucca Mountain concept, but there was a very powerful senator who did not, from the state of Nevada, Harry Reid, who ended up killing that. And so I'm not sure how we'll get there, but eventually we'll get there. I mean, right now it's being stored on site with I think almost all of these nuclear facilities, and that's something that we're still going to have to figure out. Yep, point well taken.
Governor Cox, thank you so much for being here. This is incredible. My name is Fernando. I have a background in energy, mining, and minerals, and Utah is such an important state for this. And as a result, it's important for the country, because if we're to repatriate a lot of these supply chains, electrified supply chains, defense supply chains, we are largely relying on Utah. Now, at the same time, your state would experience costs and benefits of this that other Americans will not. And so I'm curious if you could speak to this with a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I can. And in fact, I just got done with a bunch of students here on campus who are working on the critical minerals issue right now. And it was really cool. My hope in the future of our country has gone up exponentially just today in being with lots of students and seeing what's happening out there. But look, yes, there are downsides, some downsides to mining and processing of minerals. We're willing to take those downsides. We're one of the states that truly believes in the importance, not just the economic importance, but the national security implications around outsourcing our most critical supply chains and minerals to hostile enemies. And we've done that, a terrible choice. Also, by the way, again, we may sleep okay at night knowing that all the terrible harms that are coming from a safety and an environmental standpoint are being outsourced to places like China and Africa, but we shouldn't sleep better at night because we can do it cleaner and safer here than anywhere else. We have 40 of the 50 critical minerals the Department of Defense has listed in the state of Utah. And the problem is we can't get to a lot of them because they're on public lands. Again, and these aren't, look, when I say public lands, everybody thinks of like our national parks. That's not what we're talking about. There are millions and millions of acres with these critical minerals on them, places you would never go or want to go, that you will never see, that aren't beautiful, iconic landscapes. So we have these opportunities. I led the first trade mission this year. I just got back about 3 weeks ago to Canada, and it was really interesting to be the first governor to visit Canada this year. and they were great, but we need those allies, Canada and Australia. A lot of the mineral processing, China is where most of the mineral processing is happening. It's not just the mining, it's the processing piece that they have a stranglehold on. But Canada is a great ally, and they're doing so much of that, and we're really proud of the work they're doing there. We send a lot of our minerals to Canada to be processed, and we're working to build more processing in Utah. We'll take it all. We'll do it, and we'll do it gladly.
You've made finding bipartisan, nonpartisan solutions an important feature of your leadership in Utah and your time leading the Governors Association. You have a room full of people who are also interested in the same thing. I wonder if you have any advice, for the scholars, the researchers, the students, the others that are passionate about these issues, given your own experiences.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and thanks for letting me be here. Sadly, I have to go catch a plane very quickly, so I don't get to stick around. I have to head out these doors here in just a second. But look, so when I became the chair of the National Governors Association, every chair gets to have an initiative that they work on. And I was looking at healthcare, I was looking at critical minerals, looking at energy policy, and it just dawned on me and on my team that all of these big issues that we're facing as a country, we can't solve if we hate each other. And so as important as everything we're talking about here is, and it's all important, I think that is the singular issue facing us as a society today. It's why our Congress is so dysfunctional. It's why we haven't solved these biggest problems. If we can, it's why we didn't do permitting reform. If we could just, and all of you in what you do, just be careful about what we post on social media. I make these mistakes all the time. The incentives are aligned against us. There is no positive incentive for treating the left with respect in my party. There's only downside to it. And we should do it anyway, because that's the way we're going to change this country. It's not going to be a president. It's not going to be a Congress. It's not going to be a governor. It's going to be all of us deciding that we're tired of doing this, that we're exhausted, that we hate what's happening in our country today, and that we're gonna get to know our neighbors. We're going to listen to people who disagree with us and treat them with respect. We're going to get back to the things that made this country great in the first place. And so my advice to you is to be passionate about what you believe in and treat those who disagree with you with kindness and respect. And if you do that, they're much more likely to listen to your ideas as well. And at the end of the day, we'll find out that we're really not that far apart, that we all want the same things. We want a beautiful place to live. We want a place where our families can grow. We want abundance. And that's a message that resonates with all Americans.
Please join me in thanking Governor Cox.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
So thank you to the governor. Thank you to Ramin. Thank you to the panelists, speakers, to all of you in the audience, to CEPR's supporters, my terrific events team, Jialu, Sherry, Lindsay, Kim, to Ryan and Adam for helping me put together this program. This has been a terrific day. I think we now have some snacks and time to continue the conversation. So thanks to all of you.